This morning, there are still a lot of questions after a student opened fire on fellow students at Evergreen High School yesterday afternoon. The shooter is dead. One student was released from the hospital last night, but one student remains in the hospital with critical injuries. As we continue to work to learn more this morning, we are speaking with a local specialist in police and public safety psychology.
Yeah, Dr. John Nicoletti is also a member of the National Association of Sheriffs and was on scene of the shooting at Evergreen High School yesterday. Dr. Nicoletti, thank you for making the time.
Thank you for inviting me.
We understand you had a briefing with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office yesterday. Can you tell us what that was about?
Well, I can't get into detail. It was actually with some of the first responders that encountered the shooter.
And we know that there was not a resource officer at the school yesterday, though we still don't know why. What difference does that resource officer have in situations like this?
Well, the SROs, are a great addition to schools, and because they relate to kids and they get information and they can respond in a timely manner if an event starts to go down.
We also know that law enforcement had a very quick response to the school after learning about the shooting. How does that impact a situation like what we saw yesterday?
Well, what it does is, hopefully mitigate the attacker. Getting there quickly allows them to kind of, have a force field to deal with the individual. So it was a combination of Jeffco Sheriff and Jefferson County School Security. Both were involved.
The response there was so quick yesterday. You also responded to other major shootings across Colorado, like Columbine High School in 1999, the Aurora Theater shooting in 2012. How has police and public safety evolved since then?
Well, I think the big thing, you saw after Columbine, because there's a lot of controversy about they didn't go in soon enough, which wasn't necessarily accurate. They wanted to go in. So it changed in terms of responding to an event where you don't wait, you make an entry and, you try and neutralize the attackers as quickly as you can. Then the other part is people in Colorado have developed what we call trauma response. What do you do in addition to try and mitigate the attacker? You also look at, okay, how do we keep people safe? How do we check classrooms? How do we get kids out of the school? And how to kind of mobilize ambulances and different first responders. So it's a full project.
Yeah, and Dr. Nicoletti, you talked there about the trauma response. I want to ask you now about the trauma recovery. As someone in the community who specializes in that, what are some ways that community members can really help one another in the coming days?
Well, the first step is to kind of realize how you got traumatized or contaminated. We kind of categorize them in terms of individuals that were right in the middle of it. In other words, they saw and heard and had to take safety. Then there's other individuals that were in a different part of the school and they heard things. Then you have individuals who they weren't in the school, but then they heard about it. And then you have family members. So what happens is we look at different ways of getting contaminated. The folks who are there is what we call too much, too soon, and too ugly. Then for other people like family members, it'd be too much, too ugly, too similar, where their child may not have been at Evergreen High, but they hear about it. And what happens, we saw this after Columbine. Prior to Columbine, parents had assumption that schools are safe places. Columbine came along and shattered that. So when parents have their assumptions shattered, they got to figure out, how do we deal with that now? How do we keep our kids safe? And you see a lot of different reactions, like the Aurora Theater shooting. What we saw is people who basically said they're never going back to the movie theater again because they couldn't figure out a way of staying safe. So it puts a big burden in after an event, we have what's called, medical people, but then we also have trauma. And the trauma footprint is a lot larger because it, contaminates a lot of families and a lot of situations. So the big thing is to reach out and get resources. Don't worry alone. Sometimes people think they got to just kind of handle this on their own when there's plenty of support services, from counseling and EAP to other type of things. So you don't want to let the trauma just kind of sit there, then it becomes PTSD. So the quicker you can kind of get help, the better it's going to be.
Dr. Nicoletti, this, obviously affects so many people in our community because we've been through this, unfortunately, too many times. As a mother of two little kids in school and anyone at home watching right now who may be worried, what would you say to, students, to parents, to staff, teachers, and facility about safety in school?
The big thing is to review it with the kids and not scare them. What you don't want is, parents who are afraid then scaring their kids, and their kids become fearful about going to school. Since Columbine, you've seen all, and Jeffco has some of the safest schools. It's all Denver area do because of that. They have threat assessment teams, they have school resource officers, they have active shooter drills. I remember when we were just starting that, people were upset about that, feeling it was going to traumatize the kids. But what you find is the kids adapt. It empowers them. So looking at what we need to do to keep kids safe and having parents kind of work with them about what do you need? What's still bothering you? What can we do for you? Because with kids that are there, they're going to either be contaminated or what they saw or what they hear. And with trauma, unfortunately, you can never unhear what you heard or unsee what you saw. So ways of kind of putting that back into the memory center as opposed to just haunting the children.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. Knowledge with context is even better. All right, Dr. Nicoletti, thank you so much for taking the time this morning. We really appreciate it.